Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Basic Steps to Starting a Business webinar. My name is Christopher Garcia, and I'm the Business Development Specialist at the SBDC at UNM Valencia campus. What a mouthful. We created this webinar off of a great document on our website called The Basic Steps to Starting a Business, and my contact information is on this slide, so please feel free to call or email me. And a PDF of the slides will be sent to you in the follow-up email, so don't worry about getting everything down. I'm going to check our attendees real fast. I'm going to leave our slide up so you could get my contact information. And apparently I just skipped a few slides. Let's see here. Okay, continue. Before we begin, let's go over some webinar ground rules. Everyone on the call right now is muted, so don't worry about background noise. There is a feature to raise your hand, and I'll use it to make sure everything's flowing in the webinar and to ask you some questions. In fact, well, the attendees on the call right now, raise your hand just so I know you could raise your hand. If you could see and hear me and see the slides as well. Oh, guys, you guys are good. I'm going to lower your hands. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. There's a difference between the Q&A and chat, and the Q&A is where I like questions related to the slideshow. In fact, everybody on the call right now, if you could put a hi, hello, how are you, hola, cómo estás into the Q&A, I'd appreciate it, just so I can make sure everybody knows how to use that. Hola, cómo estás? Good morning. Thank you, guys. And if you have a question about a particular slide, please notice there is numbers at the bottom of the slides and include those with your question. And I'll answer them at the end of the presentation or intermittently throughout if I have some time. There's also the chat, and our lovely webinar coordinator today is Leslie Everson. And if you have any problems, technical issues that might need to be addressed, please put those in the chat. And I will let Leslie talk when we get to our webinars. I mean, to our upcoming webinar slide. Here is a graphic of our center locations throughout New Mexico, and the mission of the SBDC is to build skilled entrepreneurs and strong businesses by offering no-cost confidential business counseling and lower no-cost trainings like this one. And I'm going to tell you about the SBDC in the next few slides. And if you notice at the bottom of this slide, we have an image that says powered by the SBA. The SBA is one of our funders along with the state of New Mexico, and what the SBA stands for is the Small Business Administration. And you might have heard a lot about them recently because of PPP loans or EIDL loans. And they fund us. We aren't directly a part of them, but we do provide, we're the technical assistance arm of the SBA. And now I like to turn it over to lovely Leslie Everson. Leslie, do you want to talk to us about any upcoming webinars or workshops?
Of course I do, because we have so much going on, and thanks everyone for joining today. I want to tell you that tomorrow coming up, we have a bilingual session on financial resources, applications applying, and Dr. Lozano is always great about answering questions. We also have coming up operating agreements, bylaws, and shareholders agreements. Then the rest of this week, we have coming up your most important online stat you cannot ignore. Next week on Monday, we have smart ways to monetarily reward and retain key employees. And we may, Chris, have we lost you? I can tell about more webinars if you like.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
Here is the agenda for today's training. I'm going to tell you more about the SBDC, talk to you about our pre and post surveys for this training, get into the basic steps, and review and demonstrate our excellent research tools, which is probably my favorite part. Then I'll take questions. I'll also ask you to show your hands and ask some questions. In fact, I like to see from what part of New Mexico everybody is from. Let me open my participants. Will you raise your hand for me if you are from Central New Mexico, so the Albuquerque metro area? I'm located in the Albuquerque metro area. I serve, oh, cool. Okay, we got one. I serve Valencia, Socorro, and Southern Torrance counties, or most of Torrance County. Perfect. Welcome, Carmen. I'm going to lower your hand. Raise your hand for me if you are from the northeast part of New Mexico, so the Clayton area. Nobody from the plains of Clayton? How about from the northwest, so the Farmington area? It's on one county. How about the southeast? So the Loving, Hobbs area. And how about the, okay, oh, okay, I got one. How about from the northwest? So we're thinking Silver City, Demi. Perfect. Well, no matter where you're from, I welcome everybody to the webinar. I'm glad you could spend some time with me today. And there is an SBDC near you. In the Southwest, we have our SBDC in Farmington run by Carmen Martinez. In the Northeast, we have our SBDC in Tucumcari, and that our director recently passed away. That was Vicki Watson. In the Southeast, we have New Mexico Junior College. We have Brandon Hunt. And in the Northwest, we have our SBDC in Silver City and Deming, staffed by Mario Lafragola. And Mario helps me tremendously with lending. Now let's talk about the services of the SBDC. We offer two major services: confidential business counseling and low or no cost business trainings like this one. There are no limits to how much no cost counseling you can receive. And we have centers throughout New Mexico, so there'll be one close to you. And if you look at the graphic in the upper right-hand corner, it shows what we do. We renew, grow, launch, and start up small businesses. And if you want to get connected to a business counselor, you could either email Leslie Everson, or you could go to our website, www.nmsbdc.com, go to locations, and then start the registration process online, and somebody near you is sure to get a hold of you. This slide shows what, let me go to the next slide. This slide shows what we expect from our clients. My fellow business advisors want you to succeed, so you'll be assigned homework or further research, so please do the work necessary to succeed. We can't make decisions for you or offer tax or legal advice. We could only connect you to the information you need to make an educated decision. And part of making an educated decision is working with professionals like attorneys and accountants who are licensed to answer legal and financial questions. And I'll also show you some good resources later in the slideshow about how to find an attorney and how to find an accountant. Next, I want to remind you about important surveys we send out as part of attending these trainings. Everyone who registered for this webinar received an email from Leslie Everson saying, in anticipation of the upcoming basic steps to starting a business in New Mexico event that you have registered for, we would like to collect some preliminary information from you. With this information in hand, we can tailor the course material to better fit your needs. An exact quote, by the way. So I want to do a show of hands. How many of you received the pre-webinar survey and hopefully filled it out? Oh, very good. I see the majority of people on the call have received it and hopefully have filled it out. But if you haven't, please look for it. Sometimes it goes into your junk mailbox. Um, as part of our funding, we have to show our surveys. So please do those. You'll also receive a post-event survey so you can review the content of the webinar. That will come from Leslie Everson as well. And please do both. Very good. Now let's talk about starting a business in New Mexico. Before going into business, there are some important things you must consider. Will I make enough money to live? Will this replace my current income? Do I need the benefits offered by my current employer, like retirement plans, medical insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, disability insurance, life insurance, or other important benefits? Can you replace those benefits by starting your business? You must also think about your educational background and skills. Do you have the correct educational background and skills to understand and operate the many facets of a business? This includes bookkeeping, accounting, human resources, supply chain management, probably my least favorite, sales, and that's just to name a few. If not, you may need to hire somebody to perform those tasks or obtain further trainings. And we try to offer a variety of trainings to meet your needs. And if you notice, there's a link at the bottom of the screen. It's for test your potential as an entrepreneur. This is a document on our website. And let's see if it's going to cooperate with me today. Oh, good. It's a questionnaire and it helps you gauge your skills in different facets of being an entrepreneur. Gives you some misconceptions about being an entrepreneur. Talks about identifying startup ideas, talks about feasibility analysis, which is one of my favorite things. Talks about startup costs, startup budget, operating costs, a recap of costs, and then it has the document on which this webinar is based, the basic steps to starting a business, which is lucky number 13 steps. And on the back of that document are some government resources you may need to contact as part of starting your business. So this is available on our website right now under starting a business, and it will be included in the follow-up email I send everybody on this webinar. Let's go back to our slideshow. And you know, it's very important to gauge your readiness to be an entrepreneur before you jump into anything. And that's a great detailed document to help you do so. Now let's go through the steps one by one. These slides will be emailed to all attendees, so don't worry about writing down web addresses. And step one is defining the business. This is the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And these questions are answered in a business plan. And if you need a business loan, you must provide a business plan to the lender. There's no two ways about it. Many centers use a fill-in-the-blank template that I'll email to you in the follow-up email for this presentation. But there are more options than ever for creating a business plan. There's software like LivePlan by Palo Alto Software. The SBA.gov has a great training with worksheets on how to write a business plan. And there are more tools available on our website, nmsbdc.org. I also want to point you toward the New Mexico Economic Development Department one-stop website for starting a business. That's gonm.biz. And this website is a partnership between New Mexico agencies that you must contact when starting a business. And I want to open up, you saw the basic steps handout already in our last slide. And I want to open up the gonm.biz website and talk to you all about programs for starting and expanding a business offered by the New Mexico Economic Development Department. Most of them are underutilized and they're really great. Mostly they're utilized for expanding businesses, but there are great programs for starting a business. So this is what the website looks like. And the place that holds all the knowledge that you seek is business development. And on that business development tab, you can navigate to NMEDD programs for business. And here we see the little icons for each type of service they offer. I'm going to go over the JTIP program, the Job Training Incentive Program, and some of the programs available for finance development today. but I'm skipping over the middle, but those are programs that you could research on your own. So the Job Training Incentive Program is a program for mostly people who want to start a manufacturing business. So let's see who qualifies. Certain green industries, non-retail companies that export substantial percentage of their services out of New Mexico. And we like to refer to these as economic-based employers. And then companies that manufacture or produce a product in New Mexico. So manufacturers, if you have an online business where you're selling most of your product outside, or you're a wholesaler who sells most of your product to other states, this is a great program for you. And then certain green industries, I'm not 100% sure what New Mexico considers certain green industries, but the people at the Economic Development Department are awesome. They're always able to take or return your call. And the person in charge of this JTIP program happens to be Patrick Gannon. And the main idea behind the JTIP program is if you are one of these companies that qualifies, meets the eligibility requirements, you make a substantial investment by bringing your company to New Mexico or expanding your business in New Mexico, they will reimburse funds for training these manufacturing employees. Usually they provide half of the salary over a 3-week, 4-week period. A portion of training ranges 50 to 75%, depending on location, for up to 6 months. And the jobs that are created are usually high wage job, tax credit, and they're eligible for an additional 5% reimbursement if they are those high salary or higher salary manufacturing type positions. So for example, some businesses that have benefited from this in my service area are, there's a local brewery here that hires mostly veterans. And if you hire veterans, there is an incentive in the JTIP program. I think you get a higher reimbursement. And the Ketter, they're a plastic injection molding manufacturing plant. You might recognize them when you buy those plastic lawn chairs at a big box store or toolboxes. They located in Belen, and they took advantage of the JTIP program to train their initial hiring of employees. So that's what the JTIP program is. Let me go back. I navigated away from the NMEDD. Business development again, NMEDD programs for business. So let's go to finance development now. This is the money part. So let's talk about LEDA, which stands for the Local Economic Development Act. I got it down and I didn't even need the webpage to tell me. And what this is it's a pot of money at the state level of government. And that money is used to incentivize businesses locating to New Mexico or expanding in New Mexico, and can be awarded to the locality to subsidize things for a new business like equipment, building upgrades, renovations. And you have to meet some factors. It's usually the same factors as JTIP. They want green industries, agricultural manufactured products, or economic-based employers, you see there. And then it gives you some non-qualifying entities. But they will consider retail establishments and restaurants, maybe in rural areas of New Mexico. So keep that in mind. There's an application requirement, and the main part of this is job creation and salary and benefits information. They want to see that you are going to create a number of jobs. You're going to hold these jobs for a certain amount of time. And these jobs are going to be usually better paying jobs for people in rural areas. And that you make a big capital investment. So you're making a big investment just by locating in New Mexico. The department's role is they handle all the paperwork requirements. And the person responsible for this program is Juan Torres, and he is very good. He gets back to me by email quickly, and we are currently working on a project in Socorro, so we hope that comes to fruition. The next one I want to talk to you about is the Collateral Assistance program. So this program follows the same eligibility requirements. as the other programs, but this one's a little less strict. As you see here, employees 750 people or fewer. Business purpose is one of the industries listed in the NAICS code, and I could talk to you more about NAICS codes if you're interested. And you're considered a small business, which is usually somebody who employs under 100 people and makes under $1 million a year. So that's a broad range of eligibility right there. So if you wanted to do something like, say, you wanted to start a factory in an opportunity zone, and I'll talk to you about those soon, in Valencia County, you bought a piece of land, you want to put up, say, a metal building, and then you want to buy equipment. Those are all collateral backed, and those could be, you could get help from that LEDA program if you wanted to do that. And now you need to get a loan. So you're going to inject maybe $200,000 into the project. The collateral is in the building and the equipment. So those are collateral backed for a bank loan. But then you have to buy inventory, supplies, and you want some working capital. And there's a collateral gap. Those things are not collateral backed. Those are like things that could be spent within a month. And you don't have any other assets you could put up. This is where the Collateral Assistance Program comes into play. And the New Mexico Economic Development does whatever it does to create a secure sort of bond for you. And they will back that loan, the non-collateral back part of that loan with that bond. So it helps people who don't necessarily have enough collateral to start a big project to start a big project. It also works for smaller projects too, but usually it involves a big capital investment. And let's see. And now I want to talk to you about opportunity zones. And those are my favorite things to talk about, actually. And I like to go to the opportunity zone map to talk about these. And these are zones designated in New Mexico as low. They have low economic outcomes right now. And they have the biggest opportunity for bringing in manufacturing or agricultural based jobs to the area. And what these opportunity zones allow you to do is they allow people to fund these projects through opportunity funds. And there are many opportunity funds across the United States that specialize in different aspects of opportunity zones, like agriculture, sustainable agriculture, housing, affordable housing, manufacturing, and whatnot. And these are the orange areas on the map. As you see, I'll take you to Valencia, through a little tour of Valencia County. Bet you didn't know you were coming to Valencia County today. So most of the west side of Los Lunas or Valencia County is an opportunity zone, and most of this land in this area is either agricultural land or mixed-use manufacturing type land. In fact, we have the Los Moros Industrial Park and the Huning Industrial Park here. And then we have a large tract of housing throughout here. Not so much affordable housing, but housing. So if you wanted to start your business, your manufacturing-based business in there, you could approach an opportunity fund. And what that opportunity fund does is it allows businesses or individuals that owe the IRS capital gains taxes, that's from the sale of a home, sale of stocks, sale of a business, to defer those capital gain liabilities. So, potentially a business who's made a lot of capital gains could owe $100,000, $200,000 to the IRS. If they invest that money in an opportunity fund for a certain amount of time, if they invest for 5 years, they only have to pay back half of that liability. If they invest in that opportunity fund for 10 years, they never have to pay back those capital gains. Plus, they have the benefit of owning a piece of that opportunity fund, which owns a variety or co-owns or owns a piece of multiple businesses in these opportunity zones. The purple part of the opportunity zones are public-private projects with like the reservation for sustainable agriculture, solar projects, and whatnot. But you see there's vast tracts of land throughout low economic areas in New Mexico. You just have to get in touch with an opportunity fund. And let me see if they have. You could create an opportunity zone, I suppose, if you wanted to for the IRS. It's not that hard, but there's a lot of these funds already set up here is the list of opportunity funds, a nice little list compiled. They're usually created by investment bankers, insurance policy owners that deal in annuities and retirement plan, anybody who could manage stocks. And they have different goals. But if you approach one of these opportunity funds, you have a great idea that capital gains tax is only deferred if they invested in opportunity zones. So you see the carrot and the mule right there. The people who invest in these opportunity funds don't want to pay capital gains taxes. The people who run these opportunity funds have to invest that money or 90% of that money in an opportunity zone. And you have the benefit of being able to get partial investment or full investment from one of these funds. So I think I've explained those programs. I don't see anything in the Q&A, so I think I did an okay job. Let's go on to step 2. Step 2 is to choose a business name. And there are many legal considerations when choosing a business name, and it's very important to find a name that resonates with your target market, looks good on websites, social media, business cards, and other marketing material, is easy to spell and pronounce, and isn't trademarked or copywritten by another business entity. And I want to give you the most appetizing and my favorite example of that. So there was a restaurant in Albuquerque called Dee's Cheesecake Factory. And if you grew up in Albuquerque, this was one of your favorite places to get a sweet treat or a nice lunch. And at least it was one of mine. The owners of Dee's Cheesecake Factory started this business after World War II and trademarked the name in the state of New Mexico. Fast forward to 2010, there's a national chain called The Cheesecake Factory that wants to do business in New Mexico, but could not operate a restaurant with Cheesecake Factory in the name because the savvy owners of Dee's Cheesecake Factory reserved that business name many years before. In this example, the small business had the upper hand, but you could imagine how a small business doing business under a trademarked or copywritten business name could be put out of business, could have to change all the name and all their expensive marketing material, and it could actually destroy a new business. There are 2 types of trademarks. There's a state and a federal. The first website on the screen is for the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and they handle federal trademarks. And the second is for the New Mexico Secretary of State's office, and they handle state trademarks. These are the 2 agencies responsible for registering trademarks. And since we can't provide legal advice, it's important for you to consult with an attorney before making a decision on a business name. And I'll show you some great resources later in the presentation, including the newest member of our team, the Technology Commercialization Accelerator at New Mexico Tech, staffed by Estefanita Rawlings. And what that agency does is they're based at New Mexico Tech, and Estefanita is there to provide counseling on intellectual property. So patents, trademarks, copyrights, and whatnot. And she could help you research these things. She cannot help you with the legal aspects of them, but if you need help researching a business name, see if it's federally trademarked, she can help you with that. We also have a great resource at New Mexico State University, and I'll talk about that later. Step 3 is choosing and registering your legal structure, and the legal structure of your business is its foundation. You must carefully consider how you wish to legally operate your business, and the common business structures are on the slide. Most commonly, with new business starts in the SBDC, we deal with sole proprietorships, limited liability companies, partnerships, or S-corps. Everything but sole proprietorships must be registered with the New Mexico Secretary of State's office, and the paperwork is available. Since COVID-19, it's available solely online. More information about legal structures can be found in the document called Basics of Choosing a Business Entity. It's at the bottom. The link is at the bottom of the slide, and it's available on our website right now under Starting a Business tab. It's put together by an attorney. It tells you the law under which you're governed as a small business owner, or some of it at least. And then it tells you the pros and cons and the who, what, when, where, why, and how of each of the types of business structures. So that includes limited liability companies, sole proprietorships, so on and so forth. And whenever I look at limited liability companies, I always see this DBA, or doing business as. There is no state level DBA registration process like there may be in Colorado and Texas. So if you have a business structure that's, say, Garcia Inc., in my case, and I wanted to operate under Chris's Heating and Plumbing, that would be my DBA name, Chris's Heating and Plumbing. And I would only designate that on my municipal business license. There's no state licensing requirement. So if somebody else came in and registered Chris's Heating and Plumbing with the Secretary of State's office, I could potentially lose the ability to use that name. Now you could register for 120 days at a time, but the best way to keep a business name is to incorporate that business. And then you could, as soon as you start doing business and make your first dollar, you could trademark that business name. Get out of here. And then I have a link. It's a sneaky little link. It's that B incorporations. B Corps are a new type of corporation. They're also known as benefits corporations. And these are corporations that provide a social benefit in addition to operating a business. So think of things like Tom's Shoes. When I was younger, Tom's Shoes were the biggest fad. And what they did was they made shoes. You could buy one. You could buy a pair of shoes, and they provide a pair of shoes to somebody in Africa. And in fact, we have one of the first benefits corporations in the United States here in New Mexico in Taos-Ski Valley. And they provide a charitable benefit for their business. I'm not sure what, but some of their money goes to a charitable benefit. If you are interested in that type of business, I know that I don't want to say they're fads, but they're a very popular type of business structure these days. There's a lot of companies that do this. There's a place that makes hammocks. They have these hammocks made in Thailand. They pay the workers in Thailand a fair wage. They import those hammocks here and charge, in my opinion, way too much for them, but they're beautiful hammocks. There's a business that purchases baskets from people in Africa. They pay a fair wage to those people in Africa, and then they bring the baskets here and sell them in the United States. Those are great examples of benefits corporations. Now that we're having fun with paperwork, let's talk about step 4, to obtain your federal employer identification number. This is the unique identification number issued to your business by the IRS and is used on all federal filings. If you're a sole proprietor, your social security number is commonly used instead of an EIN, but the EIN number is just as important as a social security number and should be protected as such. No matter what business entity you choose, it's a good idea to obtain an EIN number, and it's required by most lenders and banks, credit unions, before you could open up a business bank account or take out a business loan. It's free to do the paperwork. It's available at irs.gov. I'll show you a website. In fact, let me show it to you now. Let me go to irs.gov. And I'll chat this out because I'm almost positive it's in the follow-up email, but I'm not sure. It's the IRS Small Business and Self-Employed Tax Center. And if you're reading the transcript of this recording, it says Texan instead of Tax Center. So I don't think it likes my New Mexico accent. Let me chat this over to all attendees and panelists. And on the Small Business Tax Center, there's a wealth of information for the small business owner, the self-employed person, or those participating in what they call the gig economy, which is like ride share, grocery delivery, Airbnb, like where you rent out a piece of property, but only for one night. That income that you get from those ventures is taxable, and you might want to consider starting up a small business structure. But use this as your great guide to all things federal taxes. Here's a great link to employer identification numbers. Do I need one? How do I replace one if I lost mine? There's information for the self-employed. There's information on business structures. They have a great information on businesses with employees, business tax credits. Right now, one of the biggest business tax credits for people in business would be if you keep people employed, and you have kept people employed during the pandemic, you could you don't have to pay the amount that you paid your employees in employment taxes. So you could potentially get a refund or not have to pay employment taxes for that period of time. There's information on starting a business, owning a business, closing a business. But my favorite part of this tax center is the online tools and educational products. And then they have the small business virtual tax workshop. If you are a new business owner and you're not going to have any employees, I suggest taking lessons 1 through 4. If you are going to have employees, take all 8 lessons. It's well worth your time and it's a must. And the link to the small business tax workshop definitely is in the follow-up email. Let me close some of this stuff. Let's go back to our slideshow. Continuing with our paperwork requirements, step 5 is to register with the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Office to obtain a CRS ID. You might be wondering, what's a CRS ID? What is it used for, and why do I need one? At least that's what I wondered when I had to get one. It's a unique identifying number used by the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department to record and track your business's collection and payment of gross receipts tax. If gross receipts tax is a new term for you, you might recognize it as the tax you pay whenever you buy goods or services in New Mexico. It's usually around 8% and shows up at the bottom of the receipt. At least my receipts from Walmart show. The online registration form is free to complete, but you may want to seek the advice of a certified public accountant when completing the application. Because if you're not going to file your gross receipts tax reports and pay them yourself, you're going to have your accountant or bookkeeper pay them. You might want to have your bookkeeper or your accountant involved in the setup. Also, you want to keep the information you're using for your EIN, for your business structure, and for your taxation, your CRS ID consistent. And a lot of that information is public record, like physical address, mailing address, phone number, and possibly email. So before you go into this, you might not want to be the registered agent for your business because the physical and that mailing address are public record. You might want to have your accountant or your attorney act as your registered agent. Make sure you have that in place before you start creating these IDs. Let's see. You must also file your gross receipts tax reports on a monthly, quarterly, or bi-yearly schedule. Therefore, the department offers a great online training, and the link is at the bottom of the slide. I think this link gives me trouble every slideshow, but let's double check. Oh, it's working today. Leslie, your good luck today. So here, there's 2 types of workshops from the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department. There's the New Business Workshop and the New Employers Workshop. They're each an hour long. And if you're going to start a business, just take it. It's an hour or 2 hours out of your day. Even if you're not going to handle your payment, your tracking and payment of gross receipts tax or state employment taxes, take it anyway so you know what you're subject to and how it works, so you don't get taken advantage by an unscrupulous professional. The next one happens to be, let's see, June 15th. I took this back in February as part of my professional development plan. The young woman who does this workshop knows more about gross receipts taxes than I think anybody in the state of New Mexico. I know some of you on the call might be thinking you're going to do business solely online, or you're a business that's not responsible for paying gross receipts tax. Maybe you are an independent contractor for a healthcare provider. You probably don't have to pay gross receipts tax. Your contracting agency does. And these questions could be answered in more detail during that new business workshop. So just take it, well worth your time. Perfect. Step 6 is to obtain your local business license and other applicable licenses. When doing business in New Mexico, you need a license in the municipality or county where you'll have a physical presence. And if you're talking taxes, they usually refer to this as a tax nexus. For instance, Teofilo's restaurant has a physical presence in Los Lunas, so they get a Village of Los Lunas business license. If they had a food truck and wanted to do business in Belen or Valencia County, they would have to obtain a temporary or full license in the city of Belen or Valencia County. Some of you might be thinking that you'll do business online or in another state. This means getting a business license in any place where you'll physically conduct commerce. Each municipality or county has different requirements for obtaining a business license, so check with the municipal or county office or consult an attorney for further advice. And for instance, Rio Communities, New Mexico, in my service area, asks you to sketch a floor plan of your business. Even if you're a home-based business, you have to sketch a floor plan of your business space. And the Socorro County doesn't have a formal business licensing procedure. They just have a letter on their website that says, if you are starting a business in Socorro County, please get your CRS ID number, but you do not have to get a business license. So as you see, even though Rio Communities and Socorro are within 40, 50 miles of each other, they have vastly different requirements for starting a business. And an important item you must obtain before you could even apply for a business license is your gross receipts tax ID or your CRS ID, however you want to call it. But you can't apply for a business license without it. Step 7 is to report new hires to the New Mexico directory. And the link to the directory is on the slide, but this brings human resource considerations into light. Human resources is a very important part of any business and comes with many legal and accounting considerations. You can always contact an accountant or an attorney for specific information, but I included links to 2 good resources for learning more about employment procedures and laws. So here's that link for the new hire reporting. And then here's the link for Comply Right. So Comply Right is a sponsor of the America Small Business Development Conference, and they offer lots of free guides, online learning tools, tip sheets for small businesses. They are a business themselves, and they like to provide online human resource solutions for people, but you don't have to take advantage of it. You don't have to be a customer of theirs to look at their tip sheets, their e-guides, their research, their webinars, or listen to their podcasts. So take advantage of their free material because they really put it up online specifically for SBDC clients. Let's see what some of the webinars are. Termination tutorial, 5 crucial factors to consider before firing. And I think I actually took that in person at the ASBDC conference, and it was great. They have a staff of attorneys and human resource professionals who work for them. So this information is right out of the horse's mouth when it comes to legality. Let's go back to our slideshow. And I'm going to show you the next great resource for human resource aspects of a business. And that's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's website. And they have a small business resource center. If you don't know what the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is, they're also known as the EEOC. And if they protect employees' rights at the federal level at the protected classes. So if it's usually race, creed, color, national origin, pregnancy status, and that goes on, so on and so forth. And if somebody feels that you've discriminated against them because of one of those protected factors, they would contact the EEOC. The EEOC will investigate and issue a right to sue letter, and then you will be in court, especially if you're an employer or you have a storefront where you invite people in. So take a look at that information and know your rights, know your employees' rights under the EEOC. They have a small business fact sheet right here. If you're going to be an employer especially, it's well worth your time to take a look at these resources. And they also have videos, and the videos are very informative. So those are 2 great resources for HR issues. Keeping with the HR trend, step 8 is if you have employees, you may need to complete Form ES-802. This is a required form from the New Mexico Department of Workforce Solutions or Connections, and the Department of Workforce Solutions has many tax many services, tax credits, and learning opportunities for small business owners. So I included their business outreach website on the slide. And some of the common services that the Department of Workforce Solutions offers are job postings. That's their biggest one. Pre-employment screenings like typing tests. I actually had to take one of those when I was first employed. And in some cases, they provide space to conduct interviews. So, filling out that form is pretty straightforward. Here's the link to that form. But here is the link to the Department of Workforce Solutions Business Outreach website. And some of the things I like to go over is they have a program called the WIOA program. And that WIOA program is a pot of funds designed to bring people back into the workforce by providing them free training. So say you are like a We Care agency, a St. Anthony's agency that provides at-home healthcare services and transportation for people on Medicaid, Medicare with private insurance, and you want to hire nursing assistants. If somebody goes to the Department of Labor, they meet the requirements to access WIOA funds, they could get certified as a nursing assistant or a CNA and then go work for you. So if you're interested in finding people like that, it's a great resource tool for you. They have an employer handbook that's like 60 pages long. Take a look at that, especially if you're going to be an employer. They have information about unemployment insurance. What does it mean? Do I need any? They have information about workers' comp insurance, but you could get that from an independent insurance broker as well. They have apprenticeship programs. They have internship opportunities that are usually done through YDI. You don't have to pay a penny for the interns. They pay the interns and provide them to your business. In turn, you train them in job skills. Pretty good trade-off. They have some hiring incentives, so you could qualify for a state tax credit, say if you hire a veteran, or if you hire somebody with a disability, somebody from a lower socioeconomic status. Let's see what else they have here. And then they have the federal and state posters. So places like Comply Right have poster services where you could pay to have all these posters delivered to your business. You could get those posters for free at your local Workforce Solutions or Connections. So keep that in mind. Let's go back to our slideshow. Step 9 is if you have employees, seek the assistance of an accountant. You could see all the tax acronyms on the slide. And if you aren't willing or able to deal with them, please seek out a bookkeeper or an accountant. The IRS website, and I showed you that, has a wealth of information on your federal tax obligations. The New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department has that webinar just for new employers. And there's that link to the lesson, the small business taxes, the virtual workshop. And you see SUTA, FUTA, FIT, SIT, FICA. These are all payroll deductions. So if you're not willing or able to do this yourself, definitely seek the help of a professional. Step 10 is to seek the assistance of an attorney. And we talked about important legal landmines in starting and operating a business, and attorneys are licensed to answer those questions. And I have some great resources here. I am going to take a quick 2-minute break. Leslie, if you have anything you want to say to the group, you go right ahead. I will be back in just 2 minutes, okay?
Okay, it sounds good. Let me turn off my fan because it may be a little louder again, so hold on. There, I hope that's better. So I want to tell you that the New Mexico Small Business Development Center, I know that right now you're here on basic steps, and that's a great start, but I want to make sure that everyone understands that they can seek additional counseling, the no-cost counseling at their local center. And there's 18 centers throughout New Mexico. So if you get the overview, because Chris gives everyone a lot of homework, he has a lot of links put into his webinar. So once you start getting into it and you have questions and stuff, I'll be glad to connect you with one of the local business advisors. to get you more information. Also, I want to remind everyone that he and Chris may have gone over this already, but we do send you the presentation slides. We send you a link for all our on-demand and live trainings if there's something else that you'd like to get more information on. And then we also send you a link to sign up for more counseling. So you've got all kinds of different ways to get more information for your business. So I just want to tell everyone that that is available. Also, some of the webinars that you see, I kind of help with coordinating the different webinars. So that's kind of my job for SBDC. So if there is a topic or is there something that you'd like to see in the future, please email me and I will see if I can get some information about some upcoming topics that you think will be relevant for you. So.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Leslie. I do appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I didn't have my camera on earlier, but this is me in the corner. I actually exist in real life, believe it or not. And there's Leslie. Hi, Leslie.
Hey, hi. I had my fan on, so I had to turn it off. So I hope everyone could hear me okay. So
We came in loud and clear. So I'm going to stop my video into the Q&A. I just wanted to make sure you knew I'm a real person. And now let's go over those resources for finding an attorney. So the New Mexico Bar Association has two resources. They have a referral program or referral service, and then they have an attorney or they call it a bench and bar directory. These ones give me trouble every webinar, and I will make sure the correct links are emailed to you in that follow-up email, but I want to show them to you. Let me start off with the New Mexico Patent and Trademark Library and New Mexico Tech. New Mexico Tech they receive money from the United States Patent and Trademark Office to host the Patent and Trademark Resource Center for the entire state of New Mexico. The librarian at the head of that is David Irvin. He is an awesome wealth of knowledge. And if you need help researching patents, trademarks, copyrights, he provides that service to you for free. Then we have Estefanita Rawlings at the New Mexico Tech Technology Commercialization Accelerator. Try saying that 10 times fast. And I'm going to chat over this link to everybody because they just put the website up, and I don't think I've included that in the follow-up email. And Estefanita Rawlings, we call her Steffi. She's a wealth of knowledge, just like David Irvin, on patents, trademarks, copyrights, and intellectual property. So she could also help you when researching those patents, trademarks, copyrights, and whatnot. She cannot provide legal advice, neither can David Irvin, but they could help you with the background information you need. And if you are going to hire an attorney to do a copyright, patent, or trademark for you, just the research alone could take up time, and that time is money when it comes to an attorney. So this could potentially save you a lot of money, a lot of fuss in the long run. So I chatted over those links, and I'll send you the link for David Irvin and the New Mexico Patent and Trademark Library. Let's go back. Let me open a new link, and the web address for the New Mexico Bar is nmbar. It used to be nmbar.org. Now it's statebarnm.org, I believe. Yes, okay. I'm going to chat over this link to statebar@sbnm.org. Just in case I forget to put it in the follow-up email. And under for the public, there you could do I need a lawyer, and then there's the online bar directory or the state bar general referral program. Let me start with the referral program. So if you need to contact an attorney, in my past, I've had to contact an attorney, and it's been very hard to find one who's willing to work with you, who has the time to work with you, and who'll even sit down for a consultation, more or less a low or no cost consultation. The general referral program links you with an attorney who's willing to take on your issue, and you pay them $35 $25 of the referral fee. Oh, they'll refund $25. Okay. So like 25 of it goes to the attorney for a 30-minute consultation, and the $10 goes to the New Mexico State Bar for trying to find an attorney for you. If you're in a bind, this is a great program to find an attorney, and it will save you some time. Let me go back to for the public. And let me show you the online bench and bar directory. So if you're looking for a lawyer in a certain practice area, this is the database that will help you with that. So I like to go to practice areas. Some of the common ones you might need as a business owner are the bankruptcy ones, the business corporations, estate planning, probate. That might be helpful for a lot of my business owners. Labor employment law, definitely. Taxation, definitely for my business owners. So those are some of the common ones. And then you could go by state, city, firm. There's many options here, but the only two options I like to use when using this database are practice areas and county, practice counties. So we're going to use Bernalillo County as an example. In the smaller, more rural areas of New Mexico, the attorneys are few and far between. So you may have to go to the largest municipal area in your area to find an attorney who practices in that practice area. And as you can see, they have a list of attorneys who practice in those practice areas. I'm going to pick one at random and go into their profile, and you can see here's their name, their email address, their phone number, their mailing address, and it tells you what their practice areas are. So if you're looking for an attorney, you have time to call around. Maybe you want to meet with multiple attorneys to see which one's right for you. This is a great resource for you. Let's go back to our slides. Step 11 is to review the guidelines for compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. If you're an employer or going to have a storefront, this is a must. This is another legal landmine for small businesses and should be carefully considered. And the ADA, or the American with Disabilities Association, they have a website just for business owners, and they have a primer for small business. So if you, especially if you're going to have employees or you're going to have a storefront, take a look at the primer for small business, because it could help you avoid a lawsuit in the future. That's a pretty cut and straightforward slide and information there. Step 12 is to establish a business bank account. It's best practice to keep your personal and business finances separate, and this makes your bookkeeping process easier and will help you if you ever experience an audit. You might experience a federal tax audit, a state tax audit, and then there's a gross receipts tax audit. So be aware. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or the FDIC, has a great learning module for small business owners, specifically on banking options for small business. And here's the link. It's called Money Smart for Small Business. And they have many modules, and these modules are all top-notch. This was kind of community service for the big banks when they were bailed out by the government in 2008. They put this curriculum together with help from the FDIC, and it's everything probably the banks don't want you to know. It's probably everything you should know when becoming a business owner. It's like a drawn out version of the SBA's learning resources and a very long drawn out version of this webinar. And if you take any module whatsoever, take the banking services, because banking services for small business are different than banking services for personal use. And this would give you a really good idea of what you're facing, what you're dealing with, and tips to avoid maybe some unneeded fees. The organizational types is also a great module. Remember, I was talking about business structures. There's your business structures module. So I'm glad I was able to share that resource with you today. And now let's get to lucky step number 13 and our final step. It's to have adequate business insurance coverage. And this slide shows the common types of insurance coverage for businesses. I recommend you research your options with an independent insurance broker. Oftentimes, independent insurance brokers sell insurance from many different companies and tend to be less biased because they have they go with a lot of different companies. You can learn more about business insurance by visiting the link on the slide, and it's for the Hitchcock's website, and they put together a website just for SBDC clients. If you're not aware of Hitchcock's, they're a sponsor of the America Small Business Development Conference. They're also the largest business insurer in the nation, so they do have a money-making aspect to that. But they offer a wealth of information for SBDC clients on this website. And if you're going to do anything, just take a look at these 3 videos. What is small business insurance? What is general liability insurance? And what is professional liability insurance? Know what types of insurance you might need before you go into an insurance broker's office, because sometimes they could be a little unscrupulous and they could give you more insurance than you need. You could possibly be underinsured. If you're a government contractor, there are different types of insurances you might need, like cybersecurity insurance, data breach insurance. There's a lot of new things that come along with this new technology in our world. So I'm glad I could share that resource with you. There's also a website now that I see, life and health insurance specifically. Let me go back to the Hitchcock's website and I'll show that to you. There's Be Well NM, and we all remember what Obamacare back in, I think, 2011 gave business owners more options for providing insurance coverage for their small business employees. So if you wanted to offer business insurance coverage, I'm going to chat this over for your employees. Be Well NM is a great option. They have multiple subsidized plans through the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. They'll give you a quote, you put in employees' ages, health conditions, they're a smoker or not, and it gives you a quote. It was pretty reasonable for a great insurance. I did this with another business. There was about 5 employees, and the business owner went into it thinking it was going to be a lot of money to cover insurance for 5 employees. And it was pretty affordable for a yearly mid-range coverage insurance for all 5 employees. That employer was thinking, I'm going to have to collect 50% or 60% from the employee. And when we got the quote, the employer said, well, I could probably cover the whole coverage for all my employees at this price. So think of that as a great resource for you as well. Now I'm going to demonstrate and talk about some of our research tools. And I have about 30. I want to do this pretty quickly because I want to save about 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A. So I'm going to watch the clock as I do this. So the first 4 on the slide, the numbers 1 through 4 are free. And let me talk to you about each of them. The first link is a great 30-minute webinar from the SBA's website, and it's no longer 30 minutes. It's a module, and it takes about an hour to do, and I'll show it to you. And it's about how to write a business plan. And they also provide great worksheets. Remember, I talked to you about that earlier. And it's free. It's free to take this. I actually took this as part of my professional development plan. It took me about an hour and a half. It says it's going to take you 45 minutes, 41 minutes. I don't think so. And then they have the worksheets for the business plan that gives you an example of a balance sheet, a cash flow, how to write a business plan checklist, an income statement. Take this course. It's free. It's fun. It's interactive. It's not boring. And it's offered to you as a great resource for free by the SBA. And speaking of that, they also have a great, let me go back to the SBA's main website. And this is mainly for my women on the call. but it's available to men as well. It's called Ascent for Women. And it's basically a very comprehensive course about starting a business and growing a business. And it's particularly geared towards women. I was there for the grand unveiling of this program. I think it's a great program. I think it's government money well spent. And as a man, I got just as much out of it as a woman would get. So please consider taking that if you are interested. But the big initiative from our SBA, Small Business Administration Administrator, it's now Mrs. Guzman. Before it was Ms. Carazan. One of her main, both of their main goals is to get more women into business and provide learning resources for them. They also have the regular learning center for just any old buddy, and they have a bunch of topics on many different learning modules. I particularly like the marketing one. Next is for bplans.com, and this is by Palo Alto Software. And this website provides you with numerous business plan examples. Back in the day, Palo Alto Software used to sell B plans on a disc. I'm sure all of you on the line, maybe you're as old as me, you probably remember back when we had to buy software on a CD or maybe even floppy disks. And they used to charge like $300 for all these business plan examples. They're now available for you for free at bplans.com. And they also have a wealth of other business planning tools like a startup calculator and much more. The third link is for Census Business Builder. I'm going to go over this one with you. This is a no-cost database that allows you to find demographic information about your customers, census stats about businesses in your industry, and estimates of yearly household expenditures in certain categories. And I'll demonstrate that one for you because it's one of my favorite. The last link is for the Middle Rio Grande Council of Governments. So this is basically for my people in the Albuquerque metro area. They have different council of governments in different parts of the state, and they have an interactive traffic counts map. And this allows you to enter in an address, and a lot of the main roads are mapped in this particular database, and see what the average weekday and average weekly traffic counts are for a stretch of road. So if I was going to start a storefront, I would definitely want to put my storefront on a stretch of road where there was a lot of traffic, especially if I was something like a car wash, a quick service restaurant, or any type of retail outlet, really. And then you as SBDC clients have access to special databases. The main ones we use are IBIS World, which is a database of industry reports put together by economists that talk about the industry over the next 5 years. Reference USA, which is now Data Excel. They're like a phone book on steroids, and it allows you to find markets, find big concentrations of your target market in a certain area. If you are a business to business type business, maybe you're a wholesaler, you could find businesses that you could potentially do business with. If you're creating a business plan, say you want to start a small restaurant in Belen, New Mexico, I could pull all the restaurants that are currently operating, and we could see how much, or an estimate of how much they make a year and how much they spend on certain categories. And then we have Demographics Now, which is very similar to the Census Business Builder. I don't work very much in Demographics Now, but it is a great database. I like to work in Census Business Builder, and I'll demonstrate that for you now. So let's go to the web address. And there's two types of Business Builder. There's the Small Business Edition and the Regional Analyst Edition. If you are in a place like Albuquerque with multiple zip codes, the Regional Analyst Edition is a little bit easier to use. If you are in a rural area like me, Los Lunas, Belen, we have one zip code for each of those towns. The Small Business Edition would be more worth your while. It is organized by NAICS codes or NIAC codes. And remember, we talked about that earlier during the EDD funding program. If you are a client of the SBDC, we have to put an IAC or a NAICS code into your file. So if you need help with that, I could do a whole webinar just on these codes. As a small business owner, I don't even want you to put in your brain what they're all about, but they have some quick ones in common industries. So let's look at retail. And let's look at convenience stores. And that has a NAIC or NAICS code associated with it. And then we could put in a location. So this could be a county, city, it could be the state, it could be a zip code, it could be a census tract. I'm not going to get into census tracts, but let's do a zip code 87002, which happens to be Belen. And then we could explore these characteristics on the map, the ones I talked about earlier. The map's kind of hard for me to use. It takes up a lot of bandwidth when I'm on the computer and I'm doing a webinar right now. I don't want to explore the map. I prefer the report. I like to read things, see them on a piece of paper. That's how I learned. It's also great if you want to attach this to a business plan, if you're talking about any of the stats in that area. So here you see the population breakdown by total population, age and ethnicity, race and ethnicity. Here you see the socioeconomic characteristics, median household income, educational attainment, people with disabilities, percent veterans. We have a high percent of veterans here in Valencia County. We really do. People with no vehicle, people with one vehicle. That's interesting. That's data I haven't seen before in previous reports. But my rule of thumb is if you want to start a retail establishment, you're going to look at median household income in this area. And you're wanting to go with a place that is on par with the national median household income or above. So let's just do a quick search for the I'd probably use a more legitimate source than Google if I were doing this. Actually, I would use census.gov, and the stat comes from census.gov. So in 2019, here is the median average household income for the United States. If we look at that zip code, it's lower. So I would really use that as a rule of thumb, not to say that a retail establishment wouldn't work in 87002 because we have a few, but be very careful when going into areas with low household incomes. Here are my housing characteristics. This is great information for my tradespeople. It talks about occupied housing units, the median price of an average occupied housing unit, which has gone up tremendously in this area, the cost to an owner. So if I wanted to go into a certain area and put up an apartment complex, maybe a ritzy one for seniors, maybe an affordable housing unit, I would probably want to go into a place where the rent is less expensive than owning a home. And that's just a rule of thumb too. If I was a plumber, I might want to go into a place that had expensive homes that are old. The houses in 87002 seem to be pretty new. Maybe I want to go into a place like Santa Fe, where I think the median year structure was built is like 1960. Next, my favorite part of this report is consumer spending, and you could see what the average yearly household expenditure, so that's very important, average yearly household expenditure is in certain areas. The most common ones I use are dining out, food away from the home, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. My gosh, we spend a lot on dinner in 87002. If I was going to go into one of these industries, I definitely want to seek out an area, a zip code, census tract, city, state with high expenditures in my industry. Household services, well, they really do spend a lot in that zip code. And these are interesting stats. The one that makes me laugh is dating services. Right? Let's see how much we spend on dating services in 87002. 38 cents per household per year. Probably not the best place for me to start a dating service. Let's go back to our slideshow. I will go over IBIS World quickly. Let me just go back to the internet. If IBIS World decides to work, last two times Leslie and I did this webinar, IBIS World was acting up probably because of the time of day we're doing this webinar. I go through the UNM library. All SBDCs have access to this no matter what college they're located at. So a lot of people come into my office and they want to start a restaurant. So let's look at single location full service restaurants. There's that NIAC or NAICS code 72211, and then this is BA for fast food. Most of my small businesses tend to be fast food. Some of them are full service restaurant, sit down restaurants. Let me open up a report on the single location full service restaurants and tell you, I want to show you how important this is for business planning. They're usually very relevant. They're up to date. This one was done in April of 2021. So just last month? And I'll go over the highlights with you. So anybody wanting to start one of these businesses needs to know at least the things I'm going to go over today. So these are the key external drivers. I like to call them economic drivers. And this is what will really grow your business and your revenue. So this is what a fast food restaurant. So it's dependent on consumer spending, consumer confidence index, which is a fancy way of saying how does the world view or how does the people in the United States view the strength of our economy, domestic trips by US residents, healthy eating index, and urban population. It tells you who your first and second tier suppliers are, and these suppliers are usually who you would assume supplies the restaurant. And then your buyers. So if I was a business to business, maybe I manufacture something, paper mill, I would probably serve wholesalers and then consumers in the US. So I'd have a first and second tier buyer. Restaurants serve consumers in the United States. It gives you the industry at a glance. It tells you which of the drivers are growing, declining, or staying the same. So it looks like the consumer confidence index is growing. It looks like the people in the United States have a better outlook on the economy over the next 5 years. Consumer spending is slated to grow 2.1%. And this is between 2016 and 2021. Urban population staying the same. Healthy eating index staying the same. And domestic trips by US residents are down by almost 5%. Revenue in the and remember, these are what drive business to your business. So evaluate those very carefully. If you're already in business, look at one of these reports every year, just so you could start to plan. And if you were to buy one of these reports from IBIS World, you'd spend upwards of $800. Let's see what revenue is slated to do. So between 2016 and 2026, revenue looks like it's slated to stay about the same. It doesn't look like they're giving a percentage or wanting to speculate on that quite yet. Profit looks like it's going to grow in this industry between 2016 and 2021. The profit margin in this industry is 4.6%. So that means for every dollar you bring in revenue to the business, you're putting 4.6% into profit. That's better than a secure bank investment for sure. A CD comes to mind, and it looks like that's going to grow between 2016 and 2021. The number of businesses looks like it's going to stay pretty much the same between 2016 and 2026. Employment looks like it's going to stay about the same between 2016 and 2026. And wages seem like they're going to stay the same between 2016 and 2026. The reports also tell you what products and service segmentations are most popular in this area. So remember, this is fast food restaurants. It looks like burgers win. And then you probably want to be in one of these major sectors. And this is information across the United States. So it's not to say New Mexican food wouldn't do well in New Mexico. But if you're making a big investment in this business of your time and your money, I would probably want to stick with what works the best across the United States. Then we have a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This tells you industry performance over a certain amount of time. So it looks like the industry is going to go up between 21 and 22 and then stabilize after 2020, during 2023 and forward. We might hear about that V-shaped economy or the V-shaped recovery in the news. There's that V-shaped recovery for this industry That just means everything tanked in 2020 and is slated to go up and be where it was before. And these are predictions, but educated predictions by economists. This is where this particular business is in the industry life cycle. If I'm starting a new business, I usually want my business to be in quality growth or quantity growth. That means more businesses like this are going to pop up over the next, say, 5 years. Business in the maturity section of the industry life cycle means you're competing with businesses that have been around for 8 years or more. Competition is probably fierce. And businesses in the decline stage are businesses like copy shops. Remember Kinko's back in the day? These are businesses that are either going to decline, they're going to be less starting than that are closing, in other words. Probably won't want to put my money into that market. Tells you what there's the product and service segmentations again. And then what I'm looking for is the target market. So it identifies major markets for you. We could start to do that research in Reference USA. So if I was going to start a fast food restaurant, where I probably want to invest my money in advertisement would be households earning between $50,000 and $99,999. And I could look up those. I could provide you with a list of those households in a certain area. Say you want to send them a postcard. You could also buy a list from places like Data Excel or Reference USA, and that costs about $1,000 for 5,000 contacts. Then I'd want to look at my households earning less than $50,000. So now I have a great rule of thumb, a little bit of guidance to who I should be looking for if I want to start a business like this. I could also map out those households earning between $50,000 and $99,999, and maybe that might be a great location to start this sort of business. And the last portion of this is if we're doing financial projections for a business. This gives a cost structure for the industry across the United States. So as you see the red's profit, that's about 4.6%. We could see that what percentage purchases account for, wages, and what so on and so forth. Very good rule of thumb guidance for us, especially for those starting a new business. Let's go back to our slideshow. Since this is a COVID-19 webinar, I put some of the most legitimate and up-to-date resources for operating a business during COVID-19. My favorite, and I think most important, is the EEO laws article. It talks about what you should know about COVID-19, the ADA, Rehabilitation Act, and other EEO laws. If you're wondering if you could ask an employer if they've had COVID, this article would answer that question for you. NewMexico.gov has a list of great resources for employers. OSHA has a great guide, and most of the COVID-19 information could be found at the CDC.gov. So that's a quick rundown of some of the resources for operating a business during COVID-19. Now I want to talk to you about how we measure our success together. Now that we talked about how we could help you, this is how you could help the SBDC. As part of our offering our services, we need your help to ensure our services are around for many more years. So we ask that you participate in our surveys, report economic impacts because of our assistance to your center advisor or director, or write a letter of support to a local legislator talking about your experience with the SBDC. All information is kept confidential and is only reported in aggregate to our funders, the state of New Mexico, and the Small Business Administration. This slide provides contact information for SBDC programs. That includes the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, or PTAC, and that's a government-funded program providing assistance to small businesses who want to sell their goods or services to the government, educational institutions, or tribal entities. The International Business Accelerator, or IBA, is a one-stop shop of resources for New Mexican businesses and individuals wishing to introduce their product or service into a global market. And the New Mexico Technology Commercialization Accelerator at New Mexico Tech offers no-cost confidential counseling regarding intellectual property. And that again is Steffi Rawlings. This slide continues the list of small business resource partners, SCORE, or the Service Corps of Retired Executives, West, or the Women's Business Center program. They are also a micro lender in the state of New Mexico. And VBOC, or the Veterans Business Outreach Center, and they specifically cater to veterans who want to start small businesses. Continuing with that, we have the Small Business Development Center contact information, the Small Business Administration contact information, and at our local office, the Lending Relations Specialist is Shelly Brown. Shelly always says SBA stands for Shelly Brown is awesome, and she surely is. She's a wealth of knowledge on the SBA lending programs. And then here's information for the Economic Development Department headed by Joanna Nelson. And I've worked with Joanna Nelson. She's a great resource for the state of New Mexico. A lot of people on this webinar right now might have heard about small SBA loans or SBA guarantees. The SBA puts out a resource guide. I put a link to it on the slide. And on page 27 of that resource guide, you could see who participates in SBA lending programs. The SBA doesn't lend directly. What they do is they work with the bank to provide a guarantee on a loan that you may not otherwise qualify for unless you had that guarantee. And if you go to the bottom of the guide, you will see participating certified development companies and community advantage lenders and micro lenders. If you have a startup idea and you need funding for that startup, Capital CDC and Enchantment Land CDC are willing to lend for larger projects, mostly capital expenditures like building equipment. Community Advantage lender is DreamSpring. They are usually the only lender that, along with the Loan Fund and West, who will fund a startup business, usually for under $50,000. But they do loans up to $1 million plus. And then at the bottom of all the participating lenders is an explanation of the funding programs available to you by the SBA. So take a look at that link. It'll be in the follow-up email, and it will provide a lot of insights into the lending opportunities available to you. And now I want to thank you all for spending time with me today. I'm going to look in the Q&A, and I don't see anything right now, but I am happy to answer questions. I'll turn on my camera, say hi to you once more. And if you have a question, you don't want to type it into the Q&A, raise your hand and I'll allow you to speak. I know we went over lots of information today. So if you need help on any specific topic, reach out to me, reach out to Leslie Everson to get you in touch with somebody at your local center. Go to our website at nmsbdc.org. Click the button that says Get Started and sign up as a client, and you'll be sure to get contacted by your local center. And we are here to provide technical assistance about starting and growing a business. So take advantage of your state and federally funded resources. John, let's see, had a question about the resource you looked up the fast food information on. That's IBIS World. And those are reports put together by economists about an industry over the next 5 years. If you want access to a report, please reach out, like I said, to me, Leslie Everson, or your local center via the website, and set up an appointment. We'll be happy to pull one of those reports for you, talk to you a little bit about business planning, and we'd be happy to do that for you. Remember, those reports cost upwards of $800 were you to purchase one directly from IBIS World. So this is your tax money at work. Take advantage of it. Trace, yes. Do you have any advice about filing with the Secretary of State's office? I filed for an LLC and it was denied. I have called to find out why and they have not called me back. I'm stuck. So there's probably the two main reasons why an LLC might be denied. Either you used a name that's already taken by somebody else, or you're not in good standing with the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department or the Secretary of State's office. You might have had a corporation in the past and not done your filings. You won't be in good standing. You'd have to settle that before you could start an LLC. Or if you have a tax debt with the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department, they may deny an LLC registration because of that. Or most commonly and most probably is you probably using a name that has already been taken. And I will show you a quick resource for that. Let me go back to a web. Let me go to a web page. And as you all might know, usually the answer is the simplest answer. So NMSOS. Maggie Toulouse Oliver, she's been a great Secretary of State for us over the years. Online services, business portal, business search. And if you have a particular name of a business you're interested in, you could look up all the businesses that contain that keyword. I like to use the example of Sagebrush or High Desert. There's a lot of Sagebrush Dental, there's Sagebrush Plumbing, there's High Desert Dental, High Desert Doctor's Office. You can't start a business in that industry if somebody else has taken that name. I like to use Sage. I just use Sage. And contains. Let's see if I'm a robot today. Hope not. And we could see all the businesses with Sage in their business name, and we could know what to avoid or what to go with. Osage Circle, Sagebrush, Desert Sage. We could see the different types of companies with those names. We could see if they're active, dissolved, or revoked. So use that as a great resource for finding business names in the state of New Mexico. John asks, I'm trying to start a restaurant. I'm trying to finalize my menu, but I'm having trouble trying to locate a chef. Any ideas? You could make an appointment with your local advisor. We could go on Data Excel and we could look for people in the chef NAICS code, maybe their personal chefs, the Department of Workforce Solutions, posts, employment opportunities. They would be a great resource for you. Think about those two. Tracy asks, I'm pretty sure it's not taken. Let's look. Yeah, that's a pretty unique one, Tracy. I don't think that's taken either. There's a lot of fraud that happens with EIN numbers and social security numbers too. There could be a fluke. There could have just been maybe when you tried to register your LLC, you used a PO box instead of a physical address that could get you denied. Oh, I have to certify I'm not a robot. Hopefully I'm not still. Very good. And no data is found. So yeah, definitely try to get a hold of somebody at the Secretary of State's office. I call that number, even me, you know, they probably know me because I bother them so much. I don't always get a quick response. Sometimes I have to stay on the phone for half an hour to an hour before I could get somebody. But they will do a business name search for you and they will be able to tell you why you're getting denied with that LLC. Sorry, I couldn't be more help on that one, Tracy. Okay, I don't see anything in the chat. If you have any Q&A, I'm going to say last call for the Q&A. Remember, if you want to speak a question instead of typing it in, raise your hand for me. And if we have nothing else, I will tell everybody on the call, thank you for spending time with me today. This is one of my favorite webinars to give, and I'm happy to meet with you one-on-one. The advisors and directors throughout the state are happy to meet with you one-on-one. And we are state and federally funded, so take advantage of your resources. If there's nothing else, I will wish you all to have a great day. Again, thank you, Leslie, for coordinating today's webinar. And if you have anything you want to say to the group, you go right ahead.
I just wanted to remind everyone that they will get follow-up information. So, and like I told everyone, Chris gives a lot of homework. So if you need help, let us let us know.
Sounds good. And if there's nothing else, Leslie, I think we could end. If you need me, I'm happy to stay on.
Nope, we're good.
Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye,
Okay,
everybody.
see you later. Bye.